Now coming to most important, which can be said to be the heart of third part, that is Article 21. Article 21 is nothing but a guarantee to life and personal liberty. It simply says, in simple words it says, but the words are very pregnant, and they have been giving rise to several meanings, and several rights have found shelter into the Article 21. It says that no person shall be deprived of life and personal liberty except in accordance with procedure established by law. Now, this article uses two expressions, that personal liberty and life. Now we have seen in Article 19 there are various freedoms: freedom to free speech and expression, freedom to move freely, freedom to reside anywhere according to your choice, freedom to associate, freedom to carry out any business, trade, profession. These are all in fact part and parcel of liberties, personal liberties. However, what is not expressly provided by Article 19 is covered by the concept of personal liberty, which is given in Article 21. This is called the sweeping article. It includes what is left by other articles. Therefore, the personal liberty cannot be taken away by the state, that is the instrumentality of the state, department of the state, or any agency of the state, except in accordance with the procedure established by law. Which means, in order to regulate the human conduct, in order to curtail the personal liberty, the state must have the law in place. It must provide the procedure. In the case of A.K. Gopalan versus State of Tamil Nadu, that was in the 1950, the Supreme Court of India had an occasion to define what is the meaning of this procedure established by law. Court interpreted the Article 21 saying that once there is a law and once that law provides procedure, it is sufficient, it is enough. And this was so negative kind of interpretation of Article 21 that this continued until we came in the era where Supreme Court, in the case of Maneka Gandhi, had again an occasion to review, to reconsider the meaning and import and export of this, personal liberty. In the case of Maneka Gandhi, her passport was impounded by the passport authorities, and she was not afforded any opportunity of being heard, and the case came to Supreme Court. So passport authority and the government argued that there is a provision in the Passport Act which empowers us to impound the passport without giving any such opportunity to the person whose passport is impounded. On the other hand, the petitioner pointed out that it is a fundamental right to move freely anywhere, including going to abroad. And when this fundamental right of moving freely, that is part and parcel of personal liberty, is being taken away, then there must be a procedure, and that can be done only in accordance with the procedure established by law. And this procedure must be just, fair and reasonable. If the procedure doesn't give the opportunity of being heard, there is very violation of the principles of natural justice. Then such procedure is unfair, unreasonable and arbitrary. Therefore, Supreme Court now reviewed and reversed its own judgment of A.K. Gopalan and held that it is not enough that there is a law and it provides procedure. Supreme Court said that such law must be fair, such procedure must be fair, reasonable and fair, non-arbitrary, when it is overreaching, when it is destroying or abrogating the fundamental right or personal liberty of anybody. After the case of the Maneka Gandhi, the fundamental right jurisprudence started to gain its significance, and the various rights have been now declared to be part and parcel of personal liberty and life. For example, let me tell you, right to have clean water, right to have pollution free air, right to have free medical aid, right to have speedy justice, right to have free and fair investigation, These are all rights which have found shelter into Article 21, and they are now part and parcel of Article 21. Therefore, right to clean environment is a fundamental right under Article 21. Similarly, right to free education was also found to be a fundamental right within the meaning of Article 21, though of late we have seen that there is a special addition into Article 21A, capital A, and that expressly provides right to free education to all children up to the age of 14. But even before that article, our Supreme Court of India held that right to free education was also fundamental right within the meaning of Article 21, because life cannot be enjoyed unless the life is with education. So education became the part and parcel of Article 21. Supreme Court says the word life as used in Article 21 is not just like animal life. It means not only the life but everything that goes along life and that makes the life itself worth living. So therefore, whatever is required, whatever is necessary to make the life worth living is also part and parcel of Article 21. We have seen the environment in India is protected only because of this dimension, this dynamic approach by judiciary interpreting Article 21 in such a wider way. Today, whatever environment is left in India is only because of the interpretation of Article 21 and the particularly of life in such a way. And this article, Article 21, is almost now touchstone of every law, every state policy, every policy decision of the government. Almost, and in Maneka Gandhi, Supreme Court has interpreted Article 14 and Article 21 in a way where now Article 14 and Article 21 have become part and parcel of each other. Now the law is that if some policy decision or some action of the government or the state is found to be violative of Article 14, then it is deemed that it also violates Article 21. Similarly, if any action of the government or the state is found violative of Article 21, it is deemed that it is also violative of Article 14. Therefore, what violates Article 14 also violates Article 21. Similarly, what violates Article 21 also violates Article 14. So this is the dimension, new dimension that Supreme Court has put on Article 14 and Article 21. Now thereafter, dear friends, let me share you my own example, my own experience, which I personally fought, and that was on the basis of Article 21. I carried out a research that from 1993 we have witnessed several bomb blasting in India, and I carried the research to find that how many persons have died during the bomb attacks, the terror attacks in India. I found that the terrorism was going on, and almost on regular interval the attacks were taking place, and there was no legal mechanism where the citizens who lost the life or who got injured and became disabled for the entire life are entitled to be compensated from the government. Therefore, after carrying out this research, I filed a PIL, that is public interest litigation, in Bombay High Court, and I made a prayer that the court should be pleased to declare that Article 21 not only provides right to life, but this very right to life includes right to live a protected life, right to live a secured life, and if the government fails to protect that life, then the citizen is entitled to be compensated by the government. To that effect, I filed a PIL in the Bombay High Court. I gave an example that a person who is walking on the road is meeting with an accident, say for example accident of any vehicle, and he dies or he gets injured, then there is a law which provides mechanism the remedy which compensates him. There is a Motor Vehicle Act under which there is a Motor Vehicle Tribunal. If the person loses his life, then his legal heirs can approach the court, that is tribunal, and claim a fair and just compensation, where the tribunal considers what was the age of the person who died in the accident and what was the life, what was the, there is a formula, the normal expectancy of life, that is taken into account, and how many people are depending upon him. After taking into consideration all these factors, the court, the tribunal arrives at fair and just amount of compensation, and that is given to the legal heirs. I told the court that if the same person who is instead of dying in an accident dies in an attack, that is terror attack, where is the remedy? Where should the legal heir go? So court found it very serious issue, and court issued notices to the government of India and the state government, and High Court called upon them to show whether there is any such policy, whether there is any such law. Then it came to be found that the Maharashtra government was having some policy of giving only 1 lakh rupees to the person who died in such terror attack, and that was called madat, that was called help. And similarly, there was a policy of the central government of paying 3 lakh rupees as ex gratia amount of help, not compensation, because compensation means there is a liability, there is legal right of being compensated, and there is legal duty of compensating. So I told the court that it is the duty of the government to protect the life because of Article 21, and when repeatedly government has been failing to protect the life, where is the duty? Where is the duty of paying compensation? Because there is no policy. And accordingly, the High Court has given a very landmark judgment in that matter, and that order is available in the net and on High Court website also. That was civil public interest litigation, and the PIL 62 of 14, and the order is dated I think 14th or 13th August of 14. And because of that order, the central government had to issue new policy, and central government had to enhance the amount from 3 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees, and that too as a compensation, not as a ex gratia amount, so that it is a right of citizen. Similarly, state government also had to enhance the amount from 1 lakh rupees to 5 lakh rupees as a compensation, not as a help. So now, and I also ensured that the amount of compensation, 5 lakh rupees from the central government as well as 5 lakh rupees from the state government, must be from the date when original policy came into place. So because of this, the various persons who already lost the life in earlier attacks also got compensated, and this is one such example how Article 21 is dynamic. And today, let me tell you, in Maharashtra, during that very PIL, I also pointed out that when normal citizen is murdered, or for example a woman is subjected to heinous crime like rape, then she is deprived of the fundamental right to life, and that is because of the inability of the government machinery to prevent the crime. In that matter, the person who committed the crime should be prosecuted, but apart from that, the state government itself should be held responsible, because it failed to protect the human life, it failed to prevent the crime, it failed to maintain the law and order situation in society, which resulted into the heinous crime like rape and murder. Therefore, in that matter, as a byproduct, the state government had to immediately enact a policy, and now we have a policy in the state of Maharashtra that in every such offence of murder or rape, the government is bound to pay compensation. In case of rape, amount around 3 to 3.5 lakh rupees is given to the victim, regardless. This is regardless whether the accused is brought to justice, whether he is prosecuted, whether he is found. That is another issue. The moment somebody is subjected to such a crime, then the legal heir or the victim is entitled to get the compensation, that too from the government itself. Now the accused, the person who committed the crime, may be subjected to the normal procedure that is prosecution, jail, etc., that will go on, that will take its own time. But immediately after the crime, the government is duty bound to provide the compensation to the victim. So this is the jurisprudence of compensation, which is day by day progressing, and this jurisprudence of compensation has emerged from Article 21. Let me tell you, the police department is one such department which is largely found to be violating personal liberty and life of the citizens because of the police power. Article 21 or any other article in Constitution of India doesn't expressly deal with providing the compensation. It doesn't say that the government is bound to pay the compensation. However, the Supreme Court of India in various cases, including the famous case of one Rudal Shah versus the state of Bihar, where a person who was kept in jail 14 years after he got acquitted. That means he was detained in jail 14 years and that too illegally, without any authority of law. He was acquitted by the court, but even thereafter he came to be put in jail for 14 years. And he became mad. He lost his senses. Somebody wrote a letter from the jail that so and so person is languishing in the jail for such a long time. Then matter came to be exposed. And then in that case, Supreme Court evolved the concept of compensation. This is the first case of 1983. This case was decided in the year 1983, and the compensatory jurisprudence started. In that matter, Supreme Court said that the victim of illegal detention, that is Rudal Shah, must be given compensation, and he was also given liberty to file a civil suit in the civil court to claim the compensation apart from what Supreme Court has given under its writ jurisdiction. Thereafter, this compensatory jurisprudence started getting its own impact in various cases, and in D.K. Basu case, Supreme Court said that police must follow some guidelines, some principles while arresting somebody. They must inform him what are the grounds of arrest. They must inform the friend or the relatives of the person who is being arrested, and the arrest must be reasonable and fair, because just because somebody is named as accused, he should not be arrested, and while arresting he should not be handcuffed and he should not be paraded, because this is against the human dignity, individual dignity. And if these principles are violated, then the state government must be liable to pay compensation. And this is how the compensatory jurisprudence is almost progressing every day. Recently, because arrest means deprivation of personal liberty. The moment you are arrested, you don't have the liberty. You are kept in custody. So you don't have the liberty guaranteed by the Constitution of India. Your all fundamental rights are curtailed except right to life. So this Article 21 is such an article which has given even right to be compensated. Now, right to be compensated against illegal arrest, illegal detention is also fundamental right because of Article 21. Now, Article 22 is nothing but part and parcel of Article 21 itself, because it purely deals with the personal liberty and the police atrocities. After the D.K. Basu's case, after the amendment into the CRPC, now Article 22 is also having the protection of compensation. If mandate of Article 22 is not followed, then the person who is illegally detained is entitled to get compensation. Now coming further, Article 23 and Article 24. Dear friend, these are the rights which are considering the Indian society, or in Indian society, people were subjected to bondage. People were subjected to bonded labor. People were subjected to child labor. Even today we see that we face the issue and problem of the child labor even today. So these are the articles which provide the guarantee, or which provide the protection from child labor. Child labor is legally banned because of this article in India. Similarly, nobody can be subjected to bondage labor. In earlier days, a zamindar used to, use the people like bondage, like slave. And moreover, forget about zamindar. Earlier, in our society, the impact of caste system was such a dangerous that a person who is born in particular caste was only entitled to do or carry out the business of that very caste. He was not entitled to carry out or to do any other business or livelihood calling. Therefore, Article 23rd and Article 24 are these two articles which also provide us protection from this bonded labor and child labor. And there are various laws like labor laws which regulate the child labor in India, and the person who is using any child as a labor or for labor purpose is subjected to prosecution, and it is a criminal offense because of this article. So, dear friends, these are the articles. Now, let us come to another important article of Indian Constitution, that is Article 25. Now, this article is important because it guarantees right of free conscience and right to follow, practice, profess and propagate any religion according to everyone's choice. Now, let me bifurcate this article into two, that is right of free conscience and right of religion. Now, before I explain the right of free conscience, I will give two examples of two cases, one from Bombay High Court and one from the Madras High Court, so that you will understand this concept very clear. In the year 2010 or 11 around, there was a case in Bombay High Court where a group of people filed a petition saying that the state government cannot mandate or cannot compel them to write the religion in the government applications or form, because they don't believe into any religion, because they say that all the religions are not human, they are against the humanity. Therefore, the group of people who filed petition were religionless, they were not following any religion. And then government said, no, you must say that you must belong, you belong to particular religion. You must say that you belong to Hindu religion, or you belong to Islam, you belong to Christianity, you belong to any other religion. But these people say no, because it is our fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution of India, that it is our right of free conscience. If our conscience tells us that religion is meaningless, we are entitled to maintain that view, and accordingly the case came to High Court. So in that matter, Bombay High Court has given very landmark judgment. Bombay High Court said that Article 21 actually begins with the right of free conscience and the right of religion comes later. So, court defined what is the meaning of right of free conscience. Right of free conscience means it is your own conscience, and if the conscience says that religion is meaningless, you are entitled to say so. And court says that not only you are entitled to say so, you are entitled to propagate it, you are entitled to profess it. That is, professing means publicly declaring that you don't belong to religion. Practicing means you are actually entitled to practice, not following any religion. So Bombay High Court gave the verdict in that matter, saying that right of free conscience is a fundamental right guaranteed to every citizen by Article 25, and therefore state government cannot compel any citizen to say that he belongs to particular religion. So this is interesting case on this aspect of right of free conscience. And of late, another case which I came across from the Madras High Court. I must tell you, one person filed a case in Madras High Court seeking a direction to the government of Madras that the inscription or the words which are written on the statue of Periyar Ramaswamy should be removed, because Periyar Ramaswamy was an atheist, and he said that there is no God, and one who believes in God is rogue, and one who propagates that there is God is scoundrel. And these words are found everywhere where there is a statue of Ramaswamy in the state of Madras. So the person who filed petition in the Madras High Court said that the words which are written on the statue should be removed. On the other hand, the respondent, that is the political party, which is the political party initiated or established by the none other than Periyar Ramaswamy, made it clear, and it argued that Periyar Ramaswamy during his entire life believed that there is no God, and he propagated this policy, and he felt it was his ideology that God is an instrument of exploitation, and his own entire lifetime work was only on that ideology, and therefore he was entitled to say so, and he was entitled to propagate that ideology, and therefore the words cannot be removed. The petition is not maintainable. That was the argument from the party. The Madras High Court gave a very landmark judgment in this case, again on the aspect of Article 25 and first right, that is right of free conscience. If somebody's free conscience says that there is no God, if somebody's conscience says that God is non-existent, then he is entitled to have such a conscience, because it is the fundamental right. And once it is fundamental right of free conscience, similarly, like a person can propagate, practice and follow the religion, similarly a person who doesn't believe in religion or the God can also propagate it, can also profess it, practice it and follow it. So these are the two cases which will, I think, which have given the light and idea about the conscience, that is right of free conscience. Similarly, now coming to the part of religion, the another part of Article 25. Article 25 gives you 4 rights, that is right of practicing religion, right of professing religion, right of following religion, right of propagating religion. However, there is a rider that these all rights are subject to public morality and public order and the national interest. Therefore, in the name of religion, you cannot do something which will go against the public order or national interest or the public morality. Therefore, the right of religion is subject to this national interest, public order or public morality. But given the fact that the right of free conscience is also a fundamental right, and as I have given these 2 examples, and again there are 2 examples from Bombay High Court and Punjab High Court, but I thought just let me share these 2 cases which are very clear on this aspect. The right of free conscience is also subject to such public morality, public order and the national interest. Now moving on, next rights which are pertaining to religion. Article 16 gives you a fundamental right to establish and administer the institutions where religious instruction can be given. However, there is a mandate that if any citizen is taking admission into such institution, that is educational institution, cannot be subjected to take such worship or the religious instruction that is given into that education. That simply means a religion can establish, administer the institution and taking the aid from the state, and if the aid is given by the state, then the student who comes to such institution, educational institution, cannot be subjected to taking such a worship. He can take education, but when it comes to taking religious instruction, then there is a protection that he cannot be mandated, he cannot be compelled to take so. Similarly, Article 27. Article 27 is very, very important right, because the money given by us to the government as a tax, we know there are various tax, sale tax and indirect tax, direct tax, wealth tax, income tax, various tax. So from whatever way, by whatever name called, the tax given by us to the government cannot be used by the government to promote a particular religion. And this one article is such article which makes our Indian constitution inherently secular. People say that the word secular was added and thereafter constitution became secular is absolutely erroneous, because this is the provision in Constitution of India, Article 27, which prevents the government from using the tax money for promoting the religion of its choice. That means our government should be, in fact, religionless. It should have no religion. It cannot use the money of the people to promote particular religion, any religion of its own choice. So this is such a important article in our Constitution of India. If money given by us is being used to promote a religion, we are entitled to refuse to pay the taxes. This is the protection given to us by Article 27. Similarly, Article 28 is also a fundamental right, where we can establish, we can administer, we can acquire the property in the name of religious institutions in order to promote the religion. Dear friend, just wait, because I'm exhausting my battery, so I'll now moving on to another article, Article 29, Article 30. These two articles are very important from the viewpoint of minorities. These two articles have given protection to the minorities in India. Because of these two articles, the minorities, whether they are based upon the language or the religion, are entitled to protect their language, their script of the language, and their religion or their religious identity, etc. And this right of minority is very, very vital, because in a country where there is a majority, the minorities are entitled to such protection, because it is just like the law of nature that majority will always try to overpower minority, and there are historical reasons for that, and almost in every country the minorities are accorded such fundamental rights, and including our India. So I will not elaborate this much. And now let us move to Article 32, which is most important part. I think we are closing close to the time. Therefore, I will now deal with Article 32. Now, Article 32. While dealing with this Article 32, we will be dealing with the second part of our talk, that is enforceability of fundamental rights. Now we have discussed the fundamental rights, various rights. Now, how to enforce these fundamental rights and where they are enforceable. As I have told you that the rights are enforceable against the state and the instrumentalities of the state, agencies of the state, that means departments, the officers of the state who are exercising the state power. Now, Article 32 is one such important aspect, one such important article, which gives us a fundamental right of moving to court. That means going to court and filing a petition itself is a fundamental right. That means having access to justice itself is a fundamental right. And this article says, Article 32 says that a person who is entitled to enjoy the fundamental right is also entitled to approach the Supreme Court under Article 32 by appropriate proceeding and file a petition to claim fundamental rights, and this itself is a fundamental right. That means this right cannot be taken away, this right cannot be modified, this right cannot be anyway abrogated or regulated. Now let me tell you, this right pertains to Supreme Court. This right gives you a right to approach Supreme Court. Similarly, there is another article into our Constitution of India, that is Article 226. That is also for the purpose of enforceability of the fundamental rights. It pertains to the High Court, various High Courts. Supreme Court said that Article 226 is analogous to Article 32. Therefore, approaching the High Court is also a fundamental right, just like approaching Supreme Court is fundamental right under Article 32. Simply, you can file petition under Article 226 in the High Court against any state action, against any legislative action. For example, if you find that the law made by the legislature is violative of your fundamental right, you can file a petition and say that this particular law made by the parliament or the state legislature should be declared as unconstitutional, being violative of your fundamental right. So this is how you can approach the High Court under Article 226 and under Article 32 before the Supreme Court of India with regard to enforcing your fundamental rights. Now let me tell you, of late the jurisprudence has progressed dynamically, and Supreme Court has interpreted this right of approaching the court in much wider way. And in 2015, there was a constitution bench of Supreme Court of India in the case of Anita Kushwaha versus Pushap Kushwaha. You can find this case in Google, Anita Kushwaha versus Pushap Kushwaha, where Supreme Court said that access to justice is a fundamental right guaranteed to every citizen under Article 32, read with Article 14 and 21. That simply means that it is fundamental right not only to go to Supreme Court or High Court, but also to approach all other legal authorities, all other courts in India. For example, going to civil court with a civil suit is also fundamental right. For example, if you are victim of any offence, approaching police station and making a complaint and setting the criminal law into motion by way of FIR is also fundamental right. Approaching the magistrate court under section 156. Hello. टाइम झाला का आपला? ऑलमोस्ट संपत आला, 5 मिनिटांमध्ये संपेल. हां, ओके, थँक्यू. So, in view of this latest judgment of Honorable Supreme Court of India in the case of Anita Kushwaha versus Pushap Kushwaha, access to justice is a fundamental right which gives you fundamental right to approach any court from the lowest court to the apex court, that is the Supreme Court. Now with this, dear friends, let me tell you, the fundamental rights are very, very vital part of our life, and without the existence of the fundamental right, it is just impossible to imagine the life or the personal liberty or the enjoyment of the personal liberty and various other aspect of your life. Therefore, the citizens must be well aware of the fundamental rights, so they can assert their rights by having access to the justice, approaching the various authorities, courts, and the legal law enforcement agencies, because it is now fundamental right. And with this, dear friends, as I have already told, that the fundamental rights are beyond the reach of the legislative power, which means the lawmakers cannot make a law which will take away your fundamental rights, all these fundamental rights, whether the legislature is consisting of one political party with the thumping majority. That is the impact of this fundamental right on all other lawmaking process. All the laws which are made are always subject to the fundamental right. If the law is found to be inconsistent or contrary or violating our fundamental right, it is null and void. It is meaningless. It is nugatory. And with these, dear friends, let me thank the team of Joshaba Chamber of Commerce and Agriculture.